Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the December 2014 end of the year Professor Messer A+ study group. We are live on the internet. I have an interactive pop quiz Q&A to give you. Let's see if you really know the things that are going to show up on your A+ exam. So we'll be stepping through those interactively, and I'll give you all the instructions on how to make those things happen. If you're watching us live, you can also follow along on our website. We've got a chat at the bottom of every page. You can't miss it. It's at professormesser.com. And if you're watching this live, you may even want to go to the professormesser.com/live page, where I have other links and things that might be useful there as well. Well, we've got a lot to go through this particular month. This is a bit of a shakedown cruise for those of you that have watched the study group before. The studio looks a little bit different this time, and that's because we are in a different studio. This is a completely different studio that has been built just for this very purpose. So it has a little bit of a familiar feel to it because I really liked the design of the last set, and I liked the design of this set as well. But this is one of these things where I was literally plugging things in just before going live. So I don't have all of the different camera angles available and a lot of the things that I will usually have on the study group. But I promise, as soon as I get all of these things together, I'll do an entire tour of the studio. You can see the new data center. You can see the new executive washroom. I've thought of everything. You really can't go wrong. Maybe you don't want to see the executive washroom, but I'll show you all of the technology that I have here and all of the lighting and all of the ways we control this and plans that I want to be able to do with this. This is very, very a very good place to be if you want to be able to watch what's going on with video. I can create videos whenever we want here. And of course, we can do these live study groups, which is even better. And you'll notice that I'm looking in different places if you followed along before, because a lot of the monitors that I usually have available for reference, which are usually right behind the camera, so I can simply look to the side, are now down here somewhere. And I'm looking around to try to figure out where they are. But hopefully you will all be able to follow along with me and make sure that I keep things where they're supposed to be. Well, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome aboard. We're going to have a lot of fun today. I'll show you what we're doing here. The first half of the study group, I tend to do a Q&A, and we will follow along there. Hello, chat room. You'll be able to follow along with me. I also take phone calls in the second half. So the phone number is on the professormesser.com/live page. There's also the phone numbers here that you can see on the screen. Indeed, you can see them on the screen. I also want to remind you, if you'd like to support what we're doing here, one of the things that I do, of course, is create these free videos. But if you don't have the money to pay for these, one of the things that you can do that costs absolutely nothing is to simply subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's surprising how much that helps things when you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, and it's something that doesn't cost you anything. If you'd like to follow along with our daily pop quizzes, one good place to do that is on Twitter. You can find out more about that at the link here for professormesser.com/Twitter. I also want to make you aware that there are vouchers, 10% discount vouchers. So don't take your A+ exam or any of your CompTIA exams and pay the full price. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers, and there is a code there where you can buy a voucher for a 10% discount. And that's a significant amount when you start adding up the costs of these exams and how much you have to pay and how many exams you have to take. So it's one of those things. If you are, indeed, the chat room is right on it, asking the question before I even have a chance to talk about it. If you already have your A+ certification and you're looking for continuing education units, you can get 1 CEU for each hour spent in a industry event, seminar, workshop, podcast/webinar, or conference. And I think this certainly qualifies as that. You can get up to 4 of those per CE cycle. So you obviously can't watch all of these and get the CEUs you need, but you can get up for at least 4 credits there for something like that as well. There is quite a bit that I will go through today. And if you want credit for watching this later on in the broadcast, I will be giving you a special code that you can then email to me, and I will email back you a digital certification that says, yes, indeed, you must have watched this because you know the super secret code word. So keep listening for that. You don't want to miss that if you're looking for CEUs. I also have a downloadable version of my course. If you're someone who has watched the videos online and you'd like to take these videos offline and be able to work with them, or maybe you'd like PDFs of the slides, or you want MP3 files of the audio, I've made a package where all of that is available. You can learn more about that at professormesser.com/downloadable-A+. I should probably make a better URL for that, shouldn't I? Or just go to the website. There are links right on the main page. These also include closed captions. They also have transcripts associated with them. And I've also included those transcripts and closed captions online. Every video I make for these training courses has a closed caption associated with it on YouTube that you can watch. It's not YouTube's closed caption. It's not that automated. I had a real person sit down and type things in and watch the video so that they can understand how to spell things properly, and they did an excellent job with those. So it's very useful to have that there. Now, today I told you we're going to do a Q&A. So for those of you that have followed us before, you probably know the drill. But if you haven't, and this is your first time here, you may want to follow along and participate. And to do that, you would go either to the Socrative website, which is at www.socrative.com, choose the student login, and join the room called Professor Messer. It's Professor Messer. Make sure you spell it right. There is also an app that you can get for your mobile device, whether it's iOS or Windows Mobile, or you've got Google Play for the Android devices. All of those are available. Make sure you download the Socrative student application, and you'll be able to pop that up in your mobile device so that you've got the video on one screen. Your mobile device has you answering questions in another. You can have a chat in another. There's a lot going on there. So the chat room's like they're trying to figure out, how do I get all of these things on one screen at one time? So it's a little bit of a challenge making all of these things work together, isn't it? But I think we've got a pretty good way to do this. Now, what I'd like to do is see if you're able to follow along with Socrative. So if you've popped out a new window and gone to the Socrative site or get that running, make sure that you try that out as well by going to Socrative. I have a question up right now that asks, how long have you been studying for your A+ certification? So I can see a lot of you are logging into the Socrative website right now to see how that works. And what I'm going to see on my screen is something like this. So as you're answering these questions, I will see it move interactively on my side. So I'll usually keep that private on my side so you can't see it until we're finally done, because I have pop quiz questions for you that are coming, some that I have customized based on the questions that you have sent me. So these are things that I sit down and I put into this system, and you never know what it's going to be. So it's a good way to see if you really know what you should know for your A+ certification. Or it's kind of fun. You can see we've got 20% of the people answering the live results on Socrative. I've already said, well, I've got my A+ certification already. So let's see what you remember by going through those pieces. If the chat room, by the way, if there's weirdness going on, or obviously this is, I mentioned, a shakedown cruise. It's sort of a new studio. All the equipment was pulled out, physically moved, all stuck in here again. So I'm still tweaking audio. There's a little bit still of an echo. I have things that are coming to take care of that. We can talk all about that later on. Let's get to the questions, because we've got at least 27 people that are in Socrative, and just go to socrative.com. You can join us as well, because I have other questions for you too. So let's get into that. Let's ask some questions. This is the fun part of what we're doing. Before we do that, let me remind you that if you're planning to take the A+ certification, it's 2 separate exams. Make sure that you have a look at the exam objectives. You can always go to professormesser.com/objectives to download those CompTIA objectives. And they're separated into 2 groups. We're going to cover questions from both of these, from both the 801 and the 802. So you'll be covered no matter what we're going to ask today. I'll have a nice mix from both of those. You'll be able to work with that and get those things going. One interesting point, this came up in the chat room earlier this week, and I saw questions about this on Reddit, is you'll notice on the 801 exam, it's 90 questions. The passing score is 675 out of 900. That's very difficult to even follow that. It's an odd grading scale, isn't it? But it's 900 total points. You need to get 675 points. We believe the questions are worth a different amount. Each question may be worth a different value. So you can't really determine a percentage that you need to get correct. And when you throw on the performance-based questions on top of that, we don't know if you get partial credit, if you get no credit or all credit. We just don't know. CompTIA doesn't share that information. So just make sure you know all the content the best you can, and you'll be able to go through those pieces and understand a little better. All right, everyone. So we've got you now in Socrative. You're now working with these pieces, and I am going to work this as well. I need to log into my own room so I can see what's going on, because I have my first question to give you. Here we go. So let's go to that next question. How did we do with this question? Let's go to next. Okay. And the next question I have for you, or really the first question I really have for you, is which of these would be the best way to upgrade from Windows 7 Professional x86 to Windows 7 Professional x64? And I have a number of options available to you. You could start setup from the Windows directory. You could boot into setup using the installation media and upgrade over the existing Windows. You could use the Windows Anytime Upgrade, or you could use Windows Easy Transfer. Now, all of these can be used in certain situations to upgrade Windows, but which one of these will allow you specifically to go from Windows 7 Professional x86 to Windows 7 Professional x64? This is something that came up in the chat also earlier this month. If you're trying to follow along, you're wondering, why am I asking this question? It's because you can answer it. You can go out to Socrative.com, go to the student login button, and go to the Professor Messer page, and you will be able to do that. Yes, as you're answering that in the chat room, Steve's even saying, why do they keep the rules secret on the what's graded and how it's graded? It's a really good question, and I have no idea how that is working in that piece. For those of you in the chat room you're not getting that question, I don't know why, because I'm getting the question. The one I'm showing you on the screen here is me following along in the room just to make sure I'm seeing what you're seeing. So if you're not seeing that, there may be something going on with your link to Socrative. So make sure that you have a look at that piece. Now, you'll also, there is a bit of a delay as well. So you will see on your screen, Socrative, I try to go really quick so it'll pop up on your screen, but there's a bit of a delay on the video side as you're getting this piece. Just something to think about when you work with those pieces. So the upgrading to Windows is a bit of a thing. First, I want to see how you're answering the question, since we're over here, and be able to get a feel for what makes sense for what you're doing. So let's have a look at what's going on. Now, one of the things that when I start looking at trying to understand the upgrade methods, you need to really break this down into different pieces. And Windows upgrading can be a bit of a bear because there's so many different ways to upgrade, so many different paths from different Windows versions. Windows XP has a certain set of upgrade paths that are allowed. Windows Vista, another set. Windows 7 has another set. And currently, those are the only 3 operating systems that you need to know about based on the CompTIA exam objectives. So if there's certainly people that want to know things about Windows 8. You don't need to know that currently for your CompTIA exam. CompTIA has stated publicly on Facebook that they are planning to add Windows 8 in the next major refresh of the certification. So this might be 9 months away before we even see Windows 8 ever appear. Now, of course, they could change their mind. They could add it tomorrow. They could add it today. We just won't know. There's generally 2 ways to upgrade, though. When you're upgrading Windows, there is an in-place upgrade. This allows you to upgrade the existing operating system, and it keeps everything in place. So these years that you've installed applications and you've got things exactly the way you want them on the screen and you know where things are located, the in-place upgrade allows you to go to a newer version of Windows and keep everything there. So you don't have to reinstall applications. You don't have to back anything up and then restore it. It's a very, very easy way to do that. I don't think there's I think almost every Windows upgrade I've done this way. A lot of people are very, very much against doing an in-place upgrade. They think one of the best things that you can do is scratch everything and restart from the beginning. It's a valid philosophy because you know what you're getting when you do a clean install where you're wiping everything and then you're reloading Windows onto your hardware on your hard drive, your SSD. You would start your computer, you would boot it up with the installation media to perform this particular clean install. So it's different scenarios. You could of course do a clean install for everything if you ever wanted to, but I'm someone who likes to do the in-place upgrade if I'm able to do that. Now, one of the challenges with that is the upgrade part can be a challenge. For instance, Windows Anytime is something you can use within the operating system and allows you to upgrade to different Windows. And for instance, if you want to go to Windows 7, the problem is that Windows Anytime upgrade isn't available anymore for Windows Vista. They get rid of the older versions as they are getting newer. So if you have Vista, you can't use that any longer to go to Windows 7. And probably most important for this particular question, the 32-bit version and the 64-bit versions. The 32-bit versions designated with x86 because the 32-bit processors from Intel were originally named the 8086. One was called the 8088. I guess that one doesn't count in our numbering system. There was the 286, the 386, the 486, and those processor numbers, those models that were used, we refer to as these 32-bit processors as the x86 line because you could have had a 286, a 386, a 486. This is going way back. They don't use numbers anymore because they can't trademark a number, but they can trademark a name. That's why when Pentium came out and all of the other now names that they use for processors, they're using their names instead of the number of the processor. Just as an aside, something to there's a little piece of trivia for you there. X64, we call that because it's 64-bit. Again, there's no correlation there. It's just one of those things we do in the industry. If you're trying to go from a 32-bit to a 64-bit, you have to do a migration or you have to scratch everything, you back up, scratch everything, complete clean install, and reinstall again or migrate everything over. So this goes back to this original question that we had. If I can get some of the things off the screen so you could see it, which was, if I scroll up, which of these would be the best way to upgrade from Windows 7 Professional x86 to Windows 7 Professional x64? Do I start setup from the Windows desktop? Well, we don't do that because that would be an in-place upgrade. Do I boot into setup installation media and upgrade over an existing Windows? Well, you don't upgrade over the existing Windows. That's called an in-place upgrade as well. In fact, one of the ways you can repair your Windows is to boot up with the original installation media and simply install it again over the existing Windows. I think the naming or the way I called that particular answer may have had some people think that I was doing a clean install. So if you answered that one thinking it was a clean install, I'll give you credit on that one. Use Windows Anytime Upgrade. Anytime Upgrade will not go from a 32-bit version to a 64-bit version and vice versa. So that one does not qualify as being a correct answer. And the use of Windows Easy Transfer actually would be a perfectly good thing to use because that is a migration. It backs things up, it installs, and you can then reinstall over the top of that. Windows Easy Transfer can actually do in-place upgrades. It can do upgrades from place to place. It can take all of your data, save it off to an external drive. You can do your upgrade and it re-imports everything, ideally. Windows Easy Transfer has got much better through the years. Early on, it was a little sketchy on how it worked, but now it works pretty well. And I've used Windows Easy Transfer. I think I did one on a study group a number of months ago. We did an actual Windows Easy Transfer during the process just to show you the migration. I have to find that and put that in the course notes. So as long as you were answering B and saying, I'm really nuking the existing, I'm deleting everything that's there and installing Windows. I'm really not installing over the existing Windows. I'm deleting everything first. That is the only way to go from 32-bit to 64-bit and 64-bit to 32-bit. There's no other way to do it. There's many reasons why that is. I think it becomes very complex when you get into a 32-bit versus 64-bit environment and making sure that the operating system has all of the right drivers because it has to have 64-bit drivers that communicate with the hardware. That's really one of the most important parts when you're going from 32 to 64 from the operating system perspective. Okay, I think that was a good start. I think we got things going there. We should do another question. So let's do one. And the question is, what type of memory is used to improve the performance of instruction processing? So I guess now we have to know what instruction processing is. And then we also have to know what all of these different types of memory or what all of these different words are. The options that I have for you is the type of memory you use to improve the performance of instruction processing static? Is it hybrid? Is it SDRAM? Is it DIMM? Or is it cache? It's got to be one of these. And you can only choose, I know that you can choose multiple options in Socrative, but I'm intentionally making these so there's only one option that really applies to this particular example. If you're joining us late, you can follow along and answer the questions with us to see how you do by going to Socrative.com or downloading one of these Socrative student apps, and you go to the room that's titled Professor Messer. And it'll give you an option for a room name there. That's what you want to put in is Professor Messer, all one word, and it'll pop this up on your screen and you can answer that right away. There's a lot dealing with memory on the A+ exam. This is primarily on the 220-801 exam. You've got not only understanding all the different types of memory, but of course there are within a memory family, there are different kinds as well. So one of the challenges people always say about the A+ is that there is a lot of content over a very broad area. It doesn't go super deep. The exam is designed to really get you familiar with as much technology as possible. So you don't have to learn about the details of what pins on a memory module are communicating with the memory controller. You don't have to worry about that part, or even really understand the intricacies of moving blocks of memory in and out of the CPU. All you have to understand is, of these memory types, what types are they? What do they look like? If I look at a motherboard, where do they plug in? How do I install them properly? How do I troubleshoot them? I guess that's a lot. And when you start getting into that view of everything you need to know, that is a lot of content. So maybe it goes a little bit deeper than what I was thinking. We've got a lot of people answering this. Again, you can go out to Socrative and answer static, hybrid, SDRAM, DIMM, or cache as the type of memory that can improve the performance of instruction processing. When I'm referring to instruction processing, I'm really talking about a number of different things. Let's have a look at memory. There's all kinds of memory inside of your computer. The CPU itself has a little section inside the CPU that is for temporary storage of information. It's doing calculations. It's getting an answer to that calculation, has to store that information somewhere. So there's very small areas called CPU registers where it keeps that information as it's working on it and performing those calculations. There are also caches. They can be on the CPU itself, which means they're on the die. The die is the CPU, that little piece that you see whenever you look at the pictures. I think I have a picture of a CPU die in this presentation today. There is this very, very fast static RAM inside of that that's used to store information temporarily, so you don't have to send it all the way back out to the memory. We can store it right there on the chip, so you can run some calculations and go very quickly back and forth, and that really does improve performance quite a bit. There are also a number of caches you might find off the die itself. Some CPU systems have caches on them and then have secondary or third-party caches, or third-level caches rather, that are off the CPU on the motherboard itself. Again, trying to keep that fast memory close to the CPU where all the action is going on, and then you can send everything back to that slower bus over to the memory whenever you have some time. There's also dynamic RAM. This is the memory we traditionally think of when somebody says, how much memory is in your computer? Well, we're talking about that dynamic random access memory, very similar to the dynamic RAM that's here, these SODIMMs that would go inside of a laptop, for instance. Those are memory when you want to upgrade your memory, you're upgrading your dynamic random access memory. And sometimes we'll grab some memory, whether it's part of the dynamic RAM or it's a secondary type of memory system that's used for paging information in and out from our storage devices or from memory. It's just another way to use memory inside of our computer. So there's a lot of different ways to work with that. And somebody in the chat room even says, what about synchronous dynamic random access memory? And that's a type of dynamic random access memory. And that's indeed the one. Synchronous is what we generally use in today's computers. When we're referring to upgrading our memory, it's the synchronous part of dynamic random access memory. The CPU, as I mentioned, has a cache on it. This is what a CPU die looks like, or part of one has a CPU die. It's really fast memory that's contained inside of the CPU itself. In fact, on this picture, I would bet, not knowing exactly what memory processor or CPU processor this is, this section that looks like a big cornfield, down here. I guess you can see I'm thinking along those lines of seeing this from the sky. These big sections, I'll bet, are sections set off for caching or for storing information on the CPU. You generally see that as those pieces. And if you go out to Intel's site, they got plenty of information to talk about those pieces. There's all kinds of caches. I mentioned there's level 1, level 2, and level 3 caches. These days, even the level 3 caches tend to be in the CPU. You might see a level 1, maybe that's the level 1. There's a bigger level 2, maybe there's a even larger level 3 on there. So if we look at that question and we're wondering what type of memory is used to improve the performance of instruction processing, these are the instructions that are performed by the central processing unit, the CPU, and let's see how we answered. So we had a number of people say static, and I guess to some degree cache memory is static, so I'll give you credit for that one actually. Hybrid memory, that's something that we see. Hybrid storage is really where that I'm referring to there. There's hybrid drives that have both a spinning hard drive and a memory on there, an SSD type memory section. And hybrid drives are becoming a lot less popular now that SSD prices have come down, but that's not what improves the performance of instruction processing. We've got SD-RAM. Nope, that's not the one. Certainly not DIMM, which is a type of memory package, not necessarily a type of memory. It refers to how the memory is structured, how it fits into a particular module. And the answer that we're really looking for is cache. So I think if we add up the 64 plus the 19% at the top, you guys did pretty well with that one. That was well played. Although I noticed, since I had this up when I was talking about CPU cache, suddenly everybody was changing a lot of their answers. See, Ginny says she changed it. She went back and forth. I think E or A. I should probably spend more time vetting the questions. That's the second one where we could have kind of gone either way with that. And I'm going to blame the fact that I was busy putting the studio back together this time. I'll be much better next month. So let's do another question. I'm digging this. Let's keep things going here. So let's move over into the world of laptop computers. And the question I have is about the laptop power supply. We all have these laptop power adapters on our computers. And the question is that your power adapter states that it is auto switching. It's an auto switching power adapter for a laptop. What does this mean? Well, that's a good question. The options you have available are that the power supply will charge the laptop battery and then automatically stop when the battery is fully charged. It could be that the power supply will provide both 110 volts and 220 volts simultaneously while the laptops in use are charging. We could also have C, which is the power supply will automatically use 110 volts or 220 volts depending on the power source. Or is it D, the power supply will automatically switch between AC and DC. So when we refer to auto switching, it's one of those. If you're following along again, you can go to Socrative.com or download the Socrative app, the client, or I guess that's the student app, isn't it? Download that and go to the Professor Messer room to answer that piece. So we've got a number of things. When you're dealing with power, whether you're on a desktop or you're on a laptop, you want to be sure that you have the correct power for what you're connecting to. And for those of you that generally stay in the same country, it's not usually a big deal. But if you're traveling outside of your country, you may have different power depending on where you go in the world. And so we need to understand exactly how these power supplies work, whether we are looking at a power supply that's in a laptop, whether we're looking at one in a desktop. We're never quite sure exactly the situation that we'll run into. So I'm going to go out and see what the answers might be if we start looking at some of these. So let's have a look at power supplies. First, let's see. I've given you plenty of time. We've got about 50 people that have answered. So let's see what you answered first, and then we'll go into the explanation. So the question, of course, is your power adapter states that it is auto switching. What does this mean? Let's see. 17% of you said the power supply will charge the laptop battery and stop when the battery is fully charged. 3% said it will provide both 110 and 220 volts simultaneously. Wow, a big 70% said it will automatically use 110 or 220 depending on the power source. And the power supply will automatically switch between AC and DC. We had 10%. So I think if we were leaning towards the majority, we'd have to say C, but is that really the answer we're shooting for? Let's find out. Let's drill down into this a little bit more. When we have these power supplies, whether it's for a laptop or desktop, there can be auto switching power supplies. And auto switching means that the input voltage, the voltage that you're plugging into from the wall, that input voltage into the power supply is going to run generally at one or two different voltages, depending on where you are in the world, 110 volts or 220 volts. So the auto switching piece means that no matter if you plug into either 110 or you plug into 220, it's going to work properly. Now, the way you tell this, it may not even necessarily say on the power supply itself. It may not say switching power supply on the power supply itself. Here, for instance, is a power adapter from one of my Dell laptops. I just grabbed it, took a picture, and on this Dell laptop, you can see it gives you, this is indeed an AC adapter. Here's the part number, a GX808. It is a model FA90PS0. I don't even know what that means for anything. It doesn't matter, but here's the important part, input, and that it's looking for anywhere between 100 to 240 volts. Now, you're generally going to get 110 or 220. Notice they even give you a little bit leeway on the sides of that. So you can plug this in to either of those, and by plugging it in, you're going to get at 100 volts, you'll get about 50 hertz. You're expecting 50 hertz, between 50 and 60 hertz, depending on which voltages you're getting. Notice you've got the funny little curve there. That means your input is going to be an alternating current. That's what that symbol means. And we're looking for at least 2 amps coming in of that are going to be between 100 and 240 volts, and it's going to be between 50 and 60 hertz. That kind of covers the bases internationally. That's a power supply there that you could plug into practically any power connection in any country, and all you really need, and I didn't pull one out, all you really need is the end of the plug to match the country you're going to. You don't have to convert the power. You don't have to change the power input at all. This particular power supply will automatically cover the bases. So if you're going from the United States, where I am, and I'm going to the UK, I use exactly the same power supply. I get just an adapter that changes the connector on the end, and I can plug it in wherever I go in London, for instance. Very, very simple to be able to do that. The output, that is the output in DC. Notice you've got the direct current symbol on the screen, and it's going to output 19.5 volts, and it's going to provide me 4.62 amps. And it even tells me of the plug that's plugging in, the outside of the plug is negative, the inside of the plug is positive. And just to make sure, you would probably confirm with the device you're plugging in that has exactly the same symbol, that it's expecting exactly the same amount of voltage, or you might run into a little bit of a problem when you get into that. So that is a very significant thing to consider. And if you're never quite sure, call the manufacturer and say, I'm going from the United States, I'm going to this country. Will this be able to provide me with what I need? And they'll certainly be able to give you details. And of course, plenty of resources on the internet for you. So if we look back at how we did, the answer is C. The power supply will automatically use either 110 or 220 volts, depending on the power source. There are power supplies that absolutely charge the battery and then stop when the battery is fully charged, but that's not an auto switching power supply. 110 and 220 volts simultaneously, that'd be something, wouldn't it? Nope, that is not the right answer. Just made that one up. And the power supply will automatically switch between AC and DC. That's what a power supply does on our computers, but that's not why it's called auto switching. So good job on working through those. A lot, 70% of you had that one straight on. I really didn't fool a lot of you with that one. Well, there's a lot going on here at Messer Studios, but I wanted to make you aware of a number of things that we also have available to you. You can, of course, watch all of my videos for absolutely free. But if you wanted to get a consolidated set of notes on my videos, I have these study guides available that can show you exactly the things you need to know to pass your exam. This doesn't replace a book, doesn't replace the videos, but it's like you were taking notes the entire time you were watching the videos. I've just done it for you. I've taken all of the pieces on my study guide for the A+, or for the 220801A+, and the 220802A+, and I've made those available to you. And one of the nice things about this is not only is it a nice consolidated view of all of the things from the exam, but it's also something that goes back to help the Professor Messer website. I have created these, and incredibly popular. I want to thank everyone who's purchased these. You're helping to keep the lights on and helping to keep these live events going. There's a ton of information on these. This is the 801 and the 802 study guide, and I've just tried to cram all of the pictures that I have and all of the content. Here's all of on the 802, the command line information you need to know, operating system details. There's the RAID setup. So that's one of the things that, again, just something you can use to help support what we're doing on the site. Everything is in there. I threw some test tips in there to give you an idea of things you should consider and think about. And before you walk into your exam, maybe it's just something you can use as a nice sanity check to make sure, do I know everything I need to know? And we can run through those pieces with that. They're $10 a piece. I tried to make them economical, and they're all digital. You can download them instantly, and I don't protect them in any way. This is one of these things that I've seen protected PDF files before, and it really becomes more of a nuisance than anything. I want you to have this content on all of your devices. So download this, have it on your computer, put it on your mobile device, put it on your tablet, take it wherever you're going and have it available when you're ready to take your exam. And one nice thing about this is every single dollar of this goes back to support the website. So I want to thank all of you for doing that. The hosting costs are tremendous with the website. So that's one of the advantages of being popular with the videos, is that people watch all of them. And the disadvantages, I have to actually make sure you're able to access all of those. There's hosting associated with that. And this goes a long way towards that. I want to thank everyone who's done that so far. All right, let's do another question, shall we? Let's get back into the Q&A. I've created another one here. Let me change it on your side so you can see it as well. Let's go to the next question. The question is, you're trying to connect to your corporate wireless network, but the corporate wireless network name does not appear in the list of all of the available wireless networks. Which of these would be the most likely reason for this missing network? So this is one of those scenarios where I need to plug in to this corporate network on wireless. I'm in there. What can we do with those pieces? And we've got some options available to you. Is this occurring because of MAC filtering? Is it occurring because of WPA encryption? Is it occurring because of SSID suppression? Is it because there's static IP addressing on this wireless network? Or is it 802.1x? Is that what's causing this problem? Again, a couple steps there. So there's some things you can do to make that go through those pieces. In the chat room, you're talking about my study guide. The study guides are the 801 study guides. Those were the ones you were just seeing on the screen there. So I've got quite a few on the study guide piece to go there. And my hosting, unfortunately, I can't. I do have a very green studio. However, all of the hosting for the studio is not done here. It's all done somewhere else where there's plenty of bandwidth. You folks are really sucking up bandwidth. I have multiple web servers, lots of them that are used, load balance between them. So they are all stored in a very well-designed data center to make all of that happen. So very good. All the study guides are updated. So those of you asking, hey, are you going to update these? They're all up to date. All my A+, the Network Plus, the Security Plus, the Windows 7 7680 study guides, all are completely up to date. Why would I keep stuff around that wasn't up to date? We're going to absolutely have that. So let's see how we're doing with this question. Again, if you'd like to follow along, you can, of course, go to Socrative and be able to follow along and answer the questions with this as well. One of the things with wireless networks is it's very hard to troubleshoot sometimes because you can't see it. You can't really understand what's going on, but there are tools you can get that can help you see what's going on the network. For instance, here's one I was running on my Mac OS system, and very similar ones you can get for Windows as well. This is Kismac. I think there's Kismet for the Windows side. And there are things that you can see. It will pop up a list of the SSIDs that might be out there, the service set identifiers. These are the things that allow us to identify a wireless network. This is what pops up when we bring down the list of all of the available wireless networks, and you're seeing wireless network names pop into this list. That's because the access point itself is sending you a message, an SSID that identifies this wireless network. You might also see the term BSSID. This is generally referred to as the MAC address or the physical address of the wireless adapter itself in the access point. We don't usually connect to an access point by MAC address. We aren't asking, oh, what MAC address should I connect to? We're using human names. We're something we can recognize. That's much easier, isn't it? So generally, we're using the SSID when we plan to connect to an access point. Now, if you are managing this access point, you might want to hide that name from popping up into somebody's list of available wireless networks, and you can configure this as an SSID broadcast. You can simply click the button in your access point. Probably has a little button there that says disable or enable the SSID broadcast. This is a screenshot from mine, or a screen clip from my management of my wireless access point. This is one that also you should understand that it's simply hiding the name, but people can still connect to the access point if they know the name. And somebody is simply capturing the packets that are going across the air. It's very easy to determine what the SSID might be, even if you're not broadcasting it. So this is not a security feature. It's more of a convenience feature. This is not something that will keep people out of your access point. It will simply remove it from the list, but people can still access that device if they know the name. So very important to consider all of those pieces. So how did you do? How'd you do with that question? Let's see. I've got a number of questions. Let's see. MAC filtering, 14% said MAC filtering, but we know that it's not MAC address filtering that we're dealing with here. That would certainly limit your ability to see a particular access point. But in this particular case, we're wanting to know, as I say in the question, the most likely reason for this. And very few people are doing MAC filtering on their networks, especially if they're telling you simply connect to this network. WPA encryption, even if it's encrypted, we would still be able to see the SSID broadcast, which means that the answer in this case would be SSID suppression. 78% of you said, you're suppressing that SSID. Of course you are. No wonder I can't see any of that. So very, very important to understand that those broadcasts are sent out very quick. So if you're working through the broadcasts of those SSIDs, those are sent very often in every millisecond or so, as I recall, or 100 milliseconds rather. So you've got 10 a second. I think I'm trying to remember my wireless defaults. We should probably grab a packet capture and have a look at some of those. You can see them as it's sending that out. That's why they're constantly being updated on your screen. And 802.1x is a method commonly used on wireless access points, but it's used on other devices as well to provide authentication to a separate login source. So instead of sharing a password for the wireless network, you would log in with your normal username and password. So you probably have a Windows username and password in your Windows domain, or you've been provided a username and password to log in. There's a separate database somewhere on the network that when you connect to that access point and put in your username and password, it goes and checks to see if you can really authenticate against that database, and then sends back a message to the access point or the wireless controller that says, yes, you have been authenticated via this process called 802.1x. Very, very useful to have that there. So let's continue on. I've got more questions here. I've got a lot going on, and we're running out of time. Now, there's also, again, as I mentioned, if you're tuning in for the CEU credits, you want to be sure to use the term SSID. That's going to be a very secret code that will confirm that you've indeed watched this. SSID at the top of the Professor Messer website is a Contact Us link. You can click on that, put in the secret code. If you just send SSID, you don't even have to put anything else in there. You could write a note. I see them all. Put anything in there, and I will sometime this week get to those and send back all of those messages that said, yes, you must have watched this. Here is your 1 hour to be able to work with that. All right, let's go to the next question then. We're going to continue on. Some more operating system type questions and understanding operating system and hardware integration. So the question is, if I change it on your screen as well, that you've booted in your computer into Windows 7. Got a Windows 7 desktop there, but now you'd like to check the version of BIOS that's running on your computer. Now, which of these methods would be the best way to determine the current BIOS version? So we're not booting up for the first time. You know, when you boot, you see the BIOS information shows up. You can even press a special BIOS key to go into the BIOS setup. But this isn't that situation. We've already booted into Windows 7. The options available to you are to check the system summary of the system information utility. We could go to the command prompt in Windows. Well, in this, I have Windows XP. Obviously, you'd be going to Windows 7 because I said Windows 7. Again, maybe I should get more sleep. Use the ver command at the Windows command prompt. Just ignore the XP part. Let's pretend that never happened. C would be to use another computer to query the computer's BIOS using Windows Management Instrumentation, WMI, which is very useful for a Windows environment. And if you're managing a Windows environment, WMI is really, really useful. And the D option, use a live CD utility to determine the BIOS version. So there's quite a number of options there. Some of them would help, would work. Some of them might not, but we can have you make that determination. If you would like to answer this, go out to Socrative.com, go to the Professor Messer room, and you'll be able to answer that one as well. So get in there and answer that. A lot of you are trying to figure that one out, trying to understand more of those pieces. The BIOS is something that you really don't update very often. Very rarely do you even need to check the version of it. But when you need to know, it becomes extremely important, especially if there's something that's not working quite right with the way that the hardware in your system is interacting with the operating system. And sometimes a BIOS upgrade can add additional features to your system as well. Maybe security features on boot up. Maybe it allows you, in older systems I used to work with, the motherboard would only support a certain amount of memory, but if you upgraded the BIOS, you could put even more memory on the motherboard. So you never know exactly when you will be faced with doing a BIOS upgrade. So understanding the versions that are out there become really, really useful. There's a lot that you have to work with in the BIOS, and generally you don't upgrade it unless you really, really, really need to. If everything's working, trust me, don't upgrade your BIOS. I know that a lot of you are like me, where you really want to run the latest version. Oh, a new patch is out. A new BIOS upgrade is out. Let's install it. It's got to be new. It's got to be good. That isn't necessarily the case. And a BIOS upgrade itself, the process of doing a BIOS upgrade is one where on some motherboards is a very important process. You don't want to interrupt it. Some motherboards have multiple BIOS software sections on them. So even if one gets interrupted, you can always fall back to the other one. That's a bit of a challenge to have that happen whenever that's going on. Well, in this particular case, if we look at the answer, 62 of you have sent the answer in here. So the question again, you've booted your computer into Windows 7 or XP or something, you boot it into Windows. In fact, this is the same answer whether you've booted into XP or booted into Windows 7 or Vista. And now you'd like to check the revision of BIOS on your computer, which is the best way. And 94% of you, I fooled nobody. Check the system summary under the system information utility. Use the version command will tell you the version of operating system. It will not tell you the version of the BIOS. Obviously, you're not going to use WMI on another computer to connect over the network. You could do that and get BIOS information, but why would you? Just a real pain. I'm looking for the best way to do this. In fact, up here it says, what would be the best way? And then for your A+ exam, there are many questions that will ask you which is the best way to do this, which means which is the easiest way to do this, which is the least effort to be able to make this happen. And they might give you a number of answers here. In fact, C is a completely valid answer. You could go to a different computer, you could query the system using WMI and be able to gather metrics and information about what's running on that computer. But that's not the best way. The best way is just pop open the system information utility and grab it. So keep that in mind for your A+ exam. You don't want to pick the wrong thing just because you think that's a valid answer. You have to pick the one that is the best answer. And a live CD utility, you'd be rebooting the system to get to the BIOS version, which defeats the purpose of doing this in Windows to begin with. Now, the program you're using here, the system information utility, is pretty nifty. It has a ton of information inside of it, including BIOS information. Does this screen have BIOS? It might. Am I in the information view of this? I'm running my operating system name. I've got those pieces, directory, boot device. I'm not on the right screen for that. But you can see on the left side, tons of information to go through from a hardware perspective, the components view. I've got a great view of that piece. Which one is this? Here's my BIOS version. It is right here. So I'm running VirtualBox when I pulled this up. So it's showing me, oh, you're running VirtualBox. In fact, this was an old VirtualBox version from way back in the day, running a 2006 version of that BIOS. So there's a good example of pulling that up in the system information utility. And if somebody says, what type of memories in your system? What type of video are you running? What type of hardware? What type of multimedia components are you running? What type of software do you have? Are there any print jobs running? What type of printers are in there? It's all in the system information. A great utility, and being able to use that. Very, very useful to have that there. So if you're trying to take advantage and pull these things out of there, you can do that as well. I know I move away to try to do this, and you can't actually hear what's going on. One of the great things about this mic is that it really does limit the noises from elsewhere in the room. The problem is if I go off mic, you can't hear me. So very, very useful to have that. Let's do another question. You guys did really well on that one. I want to give you another one. So the question is that you are, I'm trying to go to the next one. I think I might have, there we go. Which of these would commonly be provided on an RCA connector? Which of these? Now, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about these things. I have a couple of choices. I have 4 choices for you that would commonly be provided on an RCA connector. First, you have to know what an RCA connector is, and then you have to know what these things are, which would be HDMI video, S video, DisplayPort video, or component video. Well, it's going to be video. I got that part. Video is associated with this, but which of these videos would commonly be sent over this RCA connector? Yeah, for those of you in the looking at this piece and going back to that other choice, the one where we were talking about the system information. If you were at the command line, that's also MS-Info32. So that's where system information and MS-Info32 are exactly the same thing. If you were to go to the command line and type in MS-Info32, you'll see that pop up on that view for those pieces. This is a dynamic mic. It's a very directional mic. Not really a barrel mic. That is a different kind of mic. It's just a very directional mic, and being able to work with that. There is a number of things associated with video and making these things happen. So when I'm trying to plug in video, there's so many different ways to do it. You can imagine just in this place where I don't have my camera up. Normally I have that eye in the sky camera that shows you everything that's going on in front of me, so you can kind of get a feel for what I'm seeing. But I don't have all of the cables and things really hooked up quite yet. We'll get that going next week on the Network Plus study group. But I have so many different video types just in this room. There's HDMI. There's even another video type that I run over coax called SDI, which is a more professional type of video output. I do have video types that are running over RCA connectors. So which one of these would it possibly be to do that? Well, let's see how we did. And again, I don't think I really fooled too many people. Nobody said HDMI video. We're all kind of familiar with HDMI. We know that's not an RCA connector on the HDMI. It's not S video, is it? Well, 8% said, yeah, that could be S video. Why not? Why wouldn't that be S video? DisplayPort video. Well, see, some of you are saying HDMI. Maybe me just mentioning it. Thinking, well, is it? I don't know. 82% said component video. If we were going to go with the masses, we would probably go with them. Well, first we need to understand what an RCA connector is, don't we? This is what the RCA connector looks like on the back of a device. This is an interface type that's been around for a long time, since the 1940s, to be able to do that. Some people refer to this as a phono connector because it's a phonograph was one of the original uses of this. We see this a lot with composite and component video. Composite video is one where it's a single yellow video connector. If you go way back in the Pong days, in the Atari days, some of you can see back, I've got a picture back there of an Atari joystick that one of my sons drew years ago, years and years, and I thought it was awesome. So that's one of the pictures back there. And you had this one video connection that you plugged into an adapter. That was a video type that was composite video, where it was one single RCA connector, and it was marked as yellow. You'll still see some devices these days that use that single yellow, but we're doing HD these days. And for HD, we're running something like component video, where you have multiple RCA connectors, all of them running a different type of connection. In fact, you can see on here, this component video has the blue, the red, and the green. In fact, it's got a little yellow here in case you still have the composite that you'd like to run. But the component video uses all three of those for PB, PR, and Y. And so that's why you've got luminance, which is your Y. It's actually luminance and sync. So they synchronize the screen, the video messages going back and forth. You've got the PB, which is the blue, and the PR, which is the red on those pieces. You don't have to know what the PB and the PR and those things necessarily are, but it can be useful when you're trying to troubleshoot video problems. If you look at the cables themselves, they look like this. So you've probably seen these before. They don't lock or anything. They're kind of tight. You push them on and they stay on just with it being a tight connection. But if somebody was to pull those, they would fall right out. There's no locking mechanism for RCA. That's why you generally see them maybe on audio visual components in your home, but you don't generally see it for more professional or higher end systems. Those are using different ones to be able to work with that. There's quite a bit to work with those pieces. There's a lot there. I did mention the study group. Oh, by the way, so for those of you that answered D, component video, you were absolutely correct. Some of you came off of that one, I think. You might have chosen a different one, but component video is absolutely correct. Next week is the Network Plus study group. Next week, we've got, if you ever want to know when the next study group is, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar. There's a calendar link at the top of the page as well. And you can see when I've got something scheduled, if I have something scheduled. I don't always have something scheduled, but I try to. And that's where you would find it on that piece as well. There is a lot to get through in these last few slides. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because we're a little tight on time. Let you see those pieces on your screen there. I also want to make you aware of a couple of things. I've got some special pricing here for some things that might help, because a lot of you talk to me about how you're able to work with the A+ content and be able to answer some of these newer performance-based questions. So there is a feature for freestyle. And this is freestyle here that I'm showing you. This is from my friends at GTS Learning. And I've got the freestyle that not only has their book is online, they've got sample tests online, but they have a virtualized environment as well that I can work with. This gives me everything for 801, 802. Here's the live practice labs. In fact, I think I can get into this. I haven't run this lately, so let's see. We're gonna go right off the cuff here and see, hey, is it gonna work or not? We're just gonna do it. I'm gonna make the screen nice and big. There's my 220, 802. Launch this piece. This works just inside of your browser, so you don't need anything special to make it happen. If you want to troubleshoot the boot process, you can go right into this view, and there's a system right here that I can then power up. Some of these labs have 3, 4, and 5 different computers you can power up. So you don't have to load an operating system anywhere on your network or try to get multiple systems running and talking to each other or get virtualized environments running on your desktop. You're effectively running everything out on the internet. And what's nice about this is the labs are already written for you. Here's the lab breakdown, configuring the Windows boot. You can change the way these view on the screen if you wanted to pop those out and put them on a different screen or make them bigger. And what's nice about it, follows along. I'm going to use the HTML5 so I don't have to even use the Java. And on my computer, the HTML5 is great to be able to use that. In fact, I can even tell the Java, no, I don't want the Java piece. Let's run with the HTML5. I don't think I've got that running in a browser that's doing HTML5. I've run the client. The idea of having the virtualized environment there is one where now I can work with all of these skills that I mentioned before. In fact, we can go back to those skills like the support skills for 801, 802, disk management, user account management, running all of the pieces. This is where I want to be able to work with my practice labs. So if you're someone who doesn't want to load that up on your system and be able to work with those, extensive labs on this piece. Plus there's special pricing on the freestyle as well. If you go out to the website link, I'll stick it up here on the screen so you can see it again. Here we go, professormesser.com/freestyle labs. You will also be able to take advantage of the special pricing. And even if you don't know if this is really for you, one of the things you can also do is try it for an hour, absolutely free. So that's another thing that becomes useful to be able to work with this, is having something, well, I'm not sure it's exactly what I want, but you can absolutely run it if you want to for an hour and see if it's really right for you. Maybe you're someone who likes to do this, set it all up in your house. That's fine too. There's other options available for you to work with this as well. Whenever I start getting onto these systems and working with them remotely and trying to get things running, I sometimes want something that's very structured, very well set up, and then all I have to do is go right in and run through labs that have already been created for me. The special pricing on these is something that with the Freestyle Labs comes in handy too. You can see it's a Windows desktop. This isn't a simulated Windows desktop. It's a real Windows desktop, and it's really fast. I'm running through this now. Let's go to the network status. You can see it's a great response time. So whether you're running the HTML5 version or the Java version that I'm doing here, very useful to have that. It's accessible from many different devices. You can try that out as well. Go out to professormesser.com/freestyle labs. Let's continue on with our Q&A. I've got one, and I will probably hear the collective groans from everyone as I step through these pieces. This question is a laser printer question. People love laser printer questions. I don't know, but you just can't get enough of them. Printer questions in general, you just love them. And this one is a laser printer question. So let's go to this. And I want to know which of these best describe the exposing step of the laser printing process. Which one of these is going to be the exposing step? There was a question that was on Reddit. I go to Reddit and I search through CompTIA questions all week, and I'll often reply to some of those. And somebody was saying one book had a list of the steps of laser printing that was different than another book, and it was different than my videos. And my comment is, whenever you have something where you're not quite sure what the nomenclature is, what the language is that we're using here, always go back to the exam objectives. And the exam objectives use the term exposing to mean something. So you can always go back to what CompTIA thinks it is. Now your options will be, does it remove excess toner from the imaging drum? Does it move the toner from the drum to the paper? Does it add the toner to the charged areas of the imaging drum? Or does it write the image on the imaging drum with a laser beam? Laser beams. This is something that is now we've got everywhere. I have laser printers here in the studio. We do all of our printing for all of our products, all of the shipping, receiving, everything with those pieces. And so laser printing becomes pretty important, especially if you troubleshoot and you're looking at some of the things that are coming out of the printer and you're trying to figure out, is this working? Is it not working? What should I do? Laser printing process is going to work with you. Now, and when you start looking at this, you can always answer this, by the way, by going out to Socrative and working with these pieces. This is where you really do have to go through and step through how this laser printing process works, because it happens over and over. One sheet of paper comes out and the process has gone through 3 or 4 times, depending on the laser printer you happen to have. It's one that just doesn't go through one single pass and the print out for your page is done. This whole laser printing process happens multiple times for a single sheet of normal paper coming out of a laser printer. Now there's a lot of different moving parts with the laser printer and a lot of different steps. The first step I usually say is processing, because the printer's sitting there idle. It's doing nothing. It's not moving. It might even be these days the printers go to sleep. They use very little power. So the first thing that happens is you're going to send some information into that laser printer, and it needs to process it to be able to design the page and how it's going to be laid out. So I usually make that the first step. In some books and other materials, you'll see cleaning as the first step, and mine cleaning is the last step, but it doesn't matter. It's a circle. It's the circle of life. It's the circle of laser printing. The second step is charging. You want to be sure that the photosensitive drum is ready to receive the toner that we will ultimately put on the device. You have the exposing part that actually takes the laser, kind of hard to see in my picture if I was to take my big head out of there. There you go. The laser exposes and effectively writes the image onto the paper and is exposed to the laser beam. That's why we call it the exposing section, because the photosensitive drum is then exposed to the laser. We have the developing section with this piece to have that there. So we're actually, now that we've etched out the picture that we want on the paper, we need to get toner onto it. And it's this developing section that adds that toner onto the paper itself. We now have another step to transfer that toner and get it now onto the paper. Now we've gone from the photosensitive drum, and now we're putting that toner onto the paper itself. And we've got a fusing process after that heats up the toner, because the toner it's just this dry dust, and you have to be able to stick it to the paper by applying heat and pressure. And that's why when the paper comes out of the laser printer, it's kind of warm to have that there. And that's why, because we've just pushed it and shoved it onto the paper. And if you ran your finger across it immediately, it would not smear off of that, because it is now fused onto the paper with the fusing process. Now, in our question, we were talking about the exposing step. So that's in this particular picture, step 3, where we are writing the image on the drum with a laser. So if you're one of the 61% that answered that particular one, you would be absolutely correct. Adding the toner to the charged areas of the imaging drum is a development process of getting that there, moving the toner from the drum to the paper. We're, of course, going to the other section of this photosensitive drum, and having that moved over is later on in the process. And we've got, during the transfer section, and you've got removing excess toner from the imaging drum. I don't even think I went all the way through my picture. I was pulling it back up. Step 7 on mine is cleaning, and that's what the first one does. Very useful to have that there. Yeah, that is a good laser printer question. You should know each one of those steps. You should know what those steps are doing, and you should know what order they appear in. And for one piece of paper, it's going by many times to make that happen. All right, we're past our time frame. We always do this whenever we get into these questions. But I have another question for you. I think this may be the last one we go through. So let's make it good, shall we? Again, no cheating, no talking about it in the chat room. But I have another question here. And again, it's a printer question. I wanted to get this in because it is a printer question. Which of these maintenance tasks is most suited for thermal printers? One of these is most suited for thermal printers. What is it? Are we cleaning the print head with IPA? Are we replacing the toner cartridge? Are we replacing the print head? Or are we replacing the printer cartridge? So these are all maintenance tasks for printers, but which one of these is most suited for a thermal printer? So we have to know what those are to be able to do that. So what are they? If we're working with a thermal printer, obviously thermal is different than laser, which is different than something that's using an inkjet to transfer that. So which one of these would be specific for thermal printers? I know, laser printer questions and printer questions in general, we just don't deal with printers that much, do we? We might have a printer at home. It might be dot matrix. But then when you get into laser printers, we don't tend to have those in our homes. That's usually in a business. And thermal printers, we definitely don't have in our homes. Usually you see a thermal printer somewhere else. So that becomes a little bit more of a challenge. So let's go back, and you can always go out to Socrative and answer the question here. And we are sort of all over the place with this one, trying to figure out the answer for these types of printers. Let's actually step through what we might see. In fact, for a thermal printer, which is commonly seen on something like a receipt printer, that is something that needs to be cleaned occasionally, not because there's ink, because obviously there is no ink in a thermal printer. There's only heat, and we're heating a special kind of paper that's changing the color of the paper, usually from a white to a black. It could be a white to another color as well. This element, though, that heats up has paper going by all the time. There's usually dust, paper dust that gets in there. So we use isopropyl alcohol, IPA. Not the IPA you may be thinking about. You may be thinking about something more hoppy. In this particular case, I'm talking about a cleaning agent, IPA. It's very quick and easy to do it. Sometimes you can get a cleaning pin that has IPA in it because you only need a little bit. You don't have to have a bunch of cotton balls and the IPA and you're cleaning it off. It's something like a little pin that can be very quick with cleaning that, because the actual heating element of a thermal printer is very small. Just this tiny little piece that goes across. Usually just swab it out very gently. Sometimes you would use a swab that is one that does not have any type of fabric or it's a foam type swab. So you're not getting other pieces of things inside of that as you're cleaning it. Some have a cleaning card, so you can work with a card that slides through the printer that cleans everything. Probably not as effective as the IPA. So if you're one of the 60% that answered clean the print head with IPA, you'd be correct. Replacing a toner cartridge, that would be for a laser printer environment. Replacing a print head, that would generally be something like a dot matrix or an impact printer. Those often need print heads swapped out. With inkjet printers, you're sometimes swapping out the print head when you're swapping out the ink. So that may not be exactly what you're worried about in a thermal printer, certainly not. And replacing a ribbon cartridge, a thermal printer does not have a printer cartridge, so that's not exactly the right answer to that question either. That would only be for something like a dot matrix printer or an impact printer that has a printer cartridge. So if you answered A, clean the print head with IPA, you would be absolutely correct. Wow. Well, I've got a last tip before we finish up. People ask me all the time, I'm taking my test tomorrow. What should I do to really prepare in these last 24 hours? And I always say that one of the things that you should do is go get the exam objectives. It's remarkable how many people don't take advantage of these. It is a great study source. It lists everything that's going to be on the exam. If you've ever asked what's on the exam, is this going to be on the exam? Should I study this information because it might be on the exam? Well, this document will tell you exactly that. And one of the nice things about this exam objective document is it is remarkably comprehensive. There is a ton of information, probably more than any other manufacturer's exam objectives of their certification exam. The 801 and 802, and really CompTIA exams in general, just have a ton of information on here. Here's my 801 exam objectives. Just a ton of information. Here's the domains you need to know. But as you get into the details of it, Section 1, PC hardware. Section 1.1, configure and apply BIOS settings. You need to install firmware upgrades, or what they call flash the BIOS. You need to understand BIOS component information such as RAM, hard drive, optical drive, CPU. We need to understand BIOS configurations, the boot sequence. How do I enable and disable devices? Understanding how to set date and time in the BIOS. Configuring clock speeds. Configuring virtualization support. Understanding BIOS security. For instance, passwords, drive encryption. There's some third-party tools like LoJack and things that are built into your computer like TPM. How do those interact with the BIOS? Using the built-in diagnostics that might be in your BIOS. Monitoring with the BIOS, such as temperature monitoring, fan speeds, intrusion detection or notification, voltage, clock, and bus speed. Oh, okay, that's just section 1.1. This goes on and on. That's the first page of them. And on, and there's more of them. This is a great source. If you can go through this and just check off everything you know, this would be a great resource to use for this. And it's free. As they say in the chat room, just download it. Go to professormesser.com/objectives and use this as a checklist. That would be a great thing to be able to do with this. Well, I do have one last question for you, something I like to, I'm going to slide through one other question. And the topic I have, or the question I have for you is, what topic would you like to cover on the next A+ study group? So this is something where you can tell me what you would like to know. And I'm not going to show all the answers. I see everything that you type when you put these in. So this gives me an idea of what you would like to see on the next A+ study group, something that's top of mind for you whenever you're working with these technologies, like someone says virtualization, command line tools, smartphones, tablets, Windows versions. So all of these things are, of course, I build these questions based on what you're sending me. So that's where, when we get into these pieces and I try to put together and I sit down, I've got a blank slate and I think I've got to come up with something for the study group. What's it going to be? And this is where I go. I go to your registration and the questions you put in there. I go to the things that were on the last study group and the things you wanted to know, because it's only going to be valuable if it's things that are important to you. So that's something. I'll leave this up. You can, of course, continue to put that in even after we're done with the show today. I'll leave that up for quite a bit so you can go through those pieces. There's a lot of things that I use to keep this whole train running on the track. You'll get my daily A+ pop quiz if you subscribe to me on Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter. I mentioned also that you could subscribe to me on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. I've also got those quick reference guides, those study guides. My course notes are available if you go out to the Professor Messer website at professormesser.com/A+SG. And $10 a piece. You can't beat those. GTS Learning, again, has those great resources for studying the labs. You can find those at Freestyle Labs at professormesser.com/freestyle labs. And then you can also, of course, look every month for what we're doing with these study groups. I like to do one every month. I know last month I wasn't able to do a Network Plus study group because I dismantled everything and was in the process of moving it. So that's one of the challenges. We do one of these every month, and we hope you join us every time we do one. If you're here watching live, feel free to stick around because I have my after show where we have phone calls and we just talk about whatever happens to come to mind. Unless there's other things that come up, you can, of course, follow me on Twitter and see what's happening on Facebook and have an idea about all of those as well. But until then, we'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Let's keep this going with the after show, shall we? Do I prefer Android or Apple? I prefer both. I run all of them. I get all of those pieces. I think day to day, my current phone is an iOS device. I generally do just iOS devices. Now, did I get the phone numbers right on the live screen? Which is really the question, because phone lines are open. Phone lines are open at 347-989-8745. You can also call in on toll free if you're on Skype at 855-235-4742. Those sound right. Let's see if they are right. This is one of those things that the quality assurance needs a little help this month, doesn't it? To get those pieces there. I didn't put them on the live page, so that's why you don't have them on the live page. Be nice if there were phone numbers so you could actually call in. Why don't I put them on the live page? Well, it's too late now. So if you are looking on those pieces and wanting to call in, where can I put these phone numbers? I could put them on the screen. I can do this. Okay. I should make a lower third. I just haven't done that, have I? Got to get that going. Phone calls. Oh, I put it on the screen, that slide above. I already have a slide for it. Is that the right slide? 4742. It is the right slide. So I'll welcome you again with the slide, even though there's nothing welcoming about it. Got to tell you. So if you're calling in, there's the phone numbers. Yeah, I use both iOS and Android for different things. I've got Android. I'm, of course, testing all the devices when I do videos and change the website and I deploy things. I like to test how it's going to be in different environments. I might be on a Fire tablet. I might be on a third-party, something like a Samsung Android tablet. I've got iOS devices. I'm running this show on macOS and iOS. So a lot of the slides that I'm flipping with my my iPad tablet and sliding across there. I stuck in the back. I don't even know if you could see it because of my boom, but I've got an old Apple Cube back there. Obviously not using that, but right next to it's an iPack. So I don't use the iPack anymore from Compaq. That's old school. We don't really use those anymore, do we? To get those pieces going. That's one of those that works with that. Well, you say Apple's expensive, but it's one of those scenarios where they may be expensive. I guess it depends on what you're doing with them. If you're trying to have a live event, edit video, and do some of the things I do, currently macOS, the operating system itself, is just better versed for doing that. The internals, the architecture of it tends to provide me with more flexibility because I used to do everything on Windows as the primary desktop. And I imagine these days I could go back and forth between the two because the video editing capabilities are almost identical. It's just some of the idiosyncrasies of the Windows operating system doesn't work for some of the things I need to do. But a lot of the things that I'm running here are running on Windows. In fact, the video switching technology that's used here is a Windows environment. I could probably even show you that now because I don't have my eye in the sky view. Let me show you what I'm doing. So or show you what I see anyway. You'll be able to get a feel for this. I'm going to drink some coffee while I find the thing that I'm looking for, because I need to show you on my video hub. Is it not talking to my video hub? Is it not there? Isn't that interesting? I wonder what happened to my video hub. Well, you can see it, so that's the important part, is being able to see the video hub. I think that's one of the things we'll do. Now, in the meantime, though, while I'm trying to figure out why I can't connect to my video hub, let's take some phone calls. Let's go to the 702 area code. Hopefully, can you hear me, caller? I hear noise.
Hello?
Well, hello. What's your name?
Hello, I'm Sage.
Hello, Sage. Thanks for calling. I can hear you. You can apparently hear me. Just another thing with the new studio that we've confirmed is working. What's your question today?
Okay, well, I have this laptop, and I want to get an SSD for it. Does it matter, what type of I get?
It matters to some degree. Not all SSDs are alike. Back in the day when we were all worried about SSD longevity, there were certain SSDs that we thought would last longer. And if you've never run an SSD, that's the thing that you've probably already heard, is that, well, these SSDs only work for a certain amount of time and then they just stop working, which used to be a concern. But these days, the ability for an SSD to read and write and maintain the capacity and do all of the things it needs to do will last for years and years and years and years if you were reading and writing to it constantly. So we don't have to worry too much about SSDs and the way that they're working or confirmed now. What we're really concerned about these days is just raw speed. What types of things do you do on the system that you want to put the SSD? Is it surfing? Is it gaming? Is it video editing? What would it be?
It's a mix. I mostly use my laptop for school and gaming. So, I know my laptop and I'm out the door. So I usually, but actually yesterday, my laptop turned itself on while I was carrying it, and awesome. I thought I screwed up the hard drive because even though it's got that protection on it where
right.
it'll stop the hard drive when it detects movement.
We should hope.
I still ran a full scan on it, so. This
is one of the main reasons I went to SSD is I run the same problem when I run portable. And I always worry about that. There was always that case or the situation where I'd be in a business environment and everyone's running hard drives in their laptops, and people just pick up their hard drive and walk to a conference room, jumping around with their laptop. And from a technical perspective, I'm cringing I hope that's going to be okay. But I travel a lot with my devices. I have the same challenge. So SSD was great. I can shake it around and I don't have to worry about the hard drive being my issue because it's all static. It's all just this solid state drive, no moving parts. These days, when you're dealing with SSDs, certain SSDs are faster than others. So I was going to say, if you're in an environment or you're running a scenario where you're doing a lot of gaming, you may want very fast read and write times. It may be incredibly important. Or for me, I do a lot of video editing. I need really the fastest SSD I can get because every bit of that is going to speed up what I'm doing. If you're doing normal surfing, these days, practically any SSD is going to be, first, it's going to be amazingly, blindingly fast when you replace your hard drive. It's only after you get your SSD in, you're wondering, I wonder if I can get a faster SSD. And of course, it's funny to say that because when you go from a hard drive to SSD, your life changes. It literally changes how you work with your computer. So I think that that when you're looking at SSDs, obviously go with some of the larger names out there, but you may want to also look at statistics of what SSDs are performing well. And Tom's Hardware used to have some very good SSD. In fact, they have best SSDs for the money, December 2014 on Tom's Hardware. And this is what I use. I go here whenever I'm trying to figure out when am I going to get an SSD, and they go through the 2014 update on all of these SSDs, the prices, the performance. They even have picks. This is our pick for this. This is our pick for that. Here's a good sweet spot from a pricing perspective. all out on Tom's Hardware. It's a great resource to go if you're ever trying to figure out what SSD or any other hardware you might want to use in your system. And that's what I used whenever I went out and had to buy SSDs this summer for systems we were building. I went to Tom's Hardware to see which one of these is going to be the best.
Yeah, because right now I'm actually looking on the video right now. Is that the Crucial MX100 is the one I'm looking at right now.
Okay. There you go. And they said that's a budget buy if you're trying to save a little bit of money and you're trying to get decent performance. And it's got a great, it's high-end interface, warranted for 3 years. Got a very nice, look, the read times and the write times are up there. Notice the write time, which is really the numbers on an SSD that you really are probably going to be most interested in, because those are the ones that go all over the place. 330 megabytes per second versus the others, which are up in the 500 megabytes per second. So whenever this one is a 256 gig drive, but it's not one you would get, for instance, if you were doing gaming. But if you're doing surfing and watching videos and doing even website design, that's an exceptional purchase. The price is right on the money, and you're not paying for that extra performance that you'll never use.
Right, I mean, because I was looking to see, for the read and write for at least 500, because I know that's going to slow it down if it's lower than that.
Well, it depends also what you're doing. If you're doing mostly reading, then it's right up there with all of the others. It's writing that you usually will run into the issue. And for something like me, where gaming and video editing does a lot of writing to the disk and temporary spaces as well. So it may be worthwhile maybe you should spend a little more money and get the faster writing speed so that it will go as fast as possible. Now, at least you've got something to balance and compare against there on Tom's Hardware.
Yes, I'm seeing that as well, because I play a lot of games between Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, and Halo.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, those will use plenty of I/O, input output. So maybe spending a few extra dollars might really provide you with some additional performance that you can use whenever you're doing things like that. Absolutely.
All right, well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for answering it.
Thanks, and thanks for watching.
Have a good day, sir.
Bye-bye. There's the SSD. I loved SSD. The first time I went from a hard drive to SSD was a life changer. If you're still running a spinning hard drive and you've not experienced SSD, it's the holiday season. You should buy yourself a little present for yourself and do that as well. Very good stuff. No, I'm not gonna put down the joystick and study. I'm a bit of a gamer as well, so I like taking an hour at the end of the day and doing that. But let's see what's going on. The 661 area code up here. Hi, caller. What's your name?
Good morning. How you doing, Professor?
Hello, Anthony. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, and you?
Doing fine. I think we sent a few tweets back and forth over the last couple of weeks, didn't we?
Yes, we've been in communications, all right.
That's it. You were one of the few this week. Literally, this room was empty a number of weeks ago, and everything has been added back. All of the components have been added. Just this week, all the video and audio got set up, and it works. So I'm pretty enthused about that. So I was glad we could at least send some notes back and forth on that way. What can we do for you today?
I was talking to you about a motherboard.
Yes.
My computer was cutting on. I turned it on, it cut off, and this process went on for a while. Then all of a sudden, every time I turned it on, it would just cut off.
Ugh.
So I took the PC apart, cleaned out the fan, and checked everything inside, blew it out. And when I was putting the fan back in with the heat sink, I popped one of the connections that it goes to.
Yep.
So I think you told me that if it was for something that was new, to go to the new producers of motherboards, and if it's something old, do the eBay. So I bought a motherboard on eBay, $39. I needed the part anyway.
Right.
Hopefully the motherboard, but it was an AM2 Plus. Okay, the motherboard that I have originally is an AM2.
So did you was it a different model motherboard that you were purchasing off eBay then, or was it the same model?
It was a Gigabyte, same model Gigabyte, but it's an AM2 instead of the AM. It was an AM2 Plus instead of just the AM2.
Right. And the real question then is, you've got now a new motherboard. Is your old CPU gonna work in the new motherboard? And and the thing is, and if you've watched the videos, I talk about compatibility between the AM2 and the AM2 Plus and the differences between all of those. And whenever I start looking at motherboards, first you had mentioned new motherboards. I go to PC Part Picker. That's why I put this up on the screen so everyone could see it. There is also, for older motherboards, you obviously aren't going to buy new. That's why I recommended go to eBay and just get the same model and you can replace it. And although there is some compatibility between the AM2 and the AM2 Plus, not all motherboards do well in that compatibility side. So you may want to look at the manufacturers. In this case, I guess it's Gigabyte. Look at their documentation and see what CPUs are going to work best for that motherboard. And it may be that you can swap those in and out. And one thing to try, I don't think you're going to hurt anything by, if the CPU has the right pins and it will fit onto the motherboard, fire it up. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't, generally speaking. I understand that's not always the case, but for the AM2 and the AM2 Plus, that's generally true. One of the things I do, and this doesn't apply for your particular case, but if I flip back here to PC Part Picker, I bring that up because if you have a certain CPU you like, or you have a certain motherboard you like, you can find that motherboard in this list. For instance, let's find an Asus. Which one do I run now? Let's do the Rampage 5 Extreme, and I just add that in PC Part Picker. And it gives me statistics on this motherboard. One of the things you can do is scroll down. It will say view compatible CPUs, and it will show you all of the CPUs for that particular motherboard. So if you're trying to figure out which motherboard is which CPU is really going to be compatible for the motherboard I have, that's one way to do it. And of course, it works the other direction too. You can put in a processor, maybe one you happen to have or one you like, and say, show me all of the motherboards that are compatible with this, and you can decide which motherboard to put it in. This doesn't necessarily work with those older CPUs and those older motherboards because they're just no longer available and they're not on the PC Part Picker site. But it's a very good way if you have a newer system to try to figure that piece out. In your case, you already have a CPU and you've already got the motherboard. Go to the motherboard documentation. They'll tell you exactly what should fit on that particular piece, if it's compatible, and things you may have to change on the motherboard to make sure that it works properly.
Okay.
That's the best place to go, especially for especially for CPUs and memory. You got to get it exactly right. You don't want to mess up on those.
Okay. All right. Well, I was going to do is just put that. I'm just going to put the bridge to lock it down.
Yes.
Take one out and swap the other one and put it in, and just try to use the same motherboard.
Sure. As long as your documentation for the motherboard says that's fine, you should be great. That's one of the nice things about some of those AMD motherboards. It allows you to do a little bit of upgrading with the existing hardware, and maybe that'll work for you too.
Well, the problem was the bracket when it popped, when you lock it down. And one of the guys, I forget the place that I called, he said that you could buy the heat sink and the fan together, and the bracket comes with that. But every time I would look into Newegg and places like that, they show you the heat sink with the fan, but they didn't show you the combination of everything that comes with it. Right.
And if you're trying to piece it now all back together, and that's assuming even that you get the right bracket, especially over mail order, it's sometimes you're never quite certain you're going to get the part that you want or how it's going to work out. So true.
Exactly. So that's why I just went ahead and bought the motherboard, the AM2, because I saw in the eBay that it looks it's the same thing, same bracket that locks down the fan and the heat sink.
The other thing that I like to do, this doesn't necessarily apply to what you're doing, but I mentioned that some of the things you want to be sure you sync up on that are exactly the way they should be is when you get the motherboard, is that you're using exactly the CPU the motherboard is asking for. And you go to your manufacturer of the motherboard for that. And you also need to get exactly the type of memory that's required for that motherboard. And there may be a wide range of memory. In fact, if we're looking at the CPUs that were compatible for that motherboard, if I look at the compatible memory for that motherboard, you got a lot of choices. And you got to make sure you get exactly the right compatible memory for that motherboard.
So DDR2 or DDR3?
Well, that's a very broad term. There are so many different kinds of DDR2 or DDR3 or DDR4 that you really, really, really have to go into the details and try to figure out from the list of everything, what specific type of DDR2 or DDR3 do you need? You have to make sure it's exactly the right kind for your motherboard. And I usually will go to a memory manufacturer like Crucial or Kingston, and they'll have a memory selector, and you just put in the motherboard you have, and they'll tell you exactly what options are available to you.
Oh, okay.
Kingston and Crucial are two very good ones.
I'm familiar with Kingston.com.
Yep.
Okay.
I think is it Kingston or Kingston Memory? Kingston Memory, Kingston.com. That's the one.
Okay. Yeah, the computer went out when I finished translating a book.
Oh, of course. And that's exactly where you don't want it to have happen. Well,
exactly.
So maybe you get the CPU piece figured out and let us know how that goes too. And best of luck with that.
Yeah, I ordered a new power supply also just in case. It wasn't that expensive. So I said if it's the power supply that's going out, then at least I have it here and I can just put everything back together.
Yeah, if something's just powering off randomly, that's a pretty good idea as well.
Yeah, that's what it's doing also. Just powering off randomly. I could be looking at something and all of a sudden it just cuts off.
Yep, that's not a bad idea is to get another one of those. It can certainly help with the troubleshooting.
Okay. Thank you very much. Enjoying your lessons and have a very nice holiday.
Good talking to you, Anthony. Same to you.
You too. Take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.
And the family.
Will do. Thanks. It's one of those things. Anthony, a longtime caller, it's sort of like a saga of different things with this computer. I think he's like me. He just likes to get something that's broke and see if we can try to fix it again. One of the things I like to do as well. Looking at the chat, let's go to more calls since we got the calls and the lines open and everything is somewhat working. Still more things for me to tweak on this side. There's the 513 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was me.
I don't know if it's you either. Hi, what's your name?
Yeah, you got another Anthony here.
Hello, another Anthony. This makes it easy for me to type things in. What can we do for you today, Anthony?
First of all, great study group. My focus is really more on the networking.
Okay, mine too.
But I really love the study group. The question I had was, I'm finishing up an associate degree.
Okay.
And I'm at the end of it. I have like one class left. But I ran across a couple personal problems, and I kind of fell behind on we had a networking class, and then we had the server class.
Okay.
So I'm kind of lagging a little behind on the understanding. I didn't want to go into this last class on security.
Aha.
Lagging behind in understanding. And I was looking at the GTS learning.
Right.
And I was thinking about trying that out because you said something earlier in the study group where it doesn't really tie up your resources in your computer as far as having to download all the virtual machines because you're actually logging into the browser. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. There's nothing that's running on your local systems. It's all virtualized. And they have not just the A+ that we saw today, but they have labs for Network Plus. They have labs for Security Plus. They have labs for Cisco certifications. They've got all kinds of labs in there. So you can probably find a series of labs that'll work for what you're thinking of.
Now, are all of those included in just like when you buy into the system? Are all of those included, or you have to pick a specific one? You have to
pick the specific lab type that you're working towards. So if you're doing Network Plus, you would buy the Network Plus labs, and that gives you access to just the Network Plus side of things. If you wanted Security Plus, you need the Security Plus labs, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get the one that's specific to what you're learning.
Okay, so I'm pretty much leaning toward, I was going to get your opinion on it, but I pretty much know what your answer would be. I would really be more interested in your elaboration from your experience with it.
One of the things that I like about the setup they have is all the labs are already done. So you can step through them and you don't have to find labs. Now, a lot of people like the idea of going online and doing that. The downside of this is that you do have to be online to do this piece of it. There's a whole set of labs there that's available, but they're labs that are written specifically for those courses online. There's a lot of different systems online, but some people prefer using the books they already have because a number of books already have labs built in, but that means you just have to build them locally on their systems. But some people like doing that. So if you're someone who likes loading up a virtual system, you have to, of course, find the licensing for the operating system that you're going to use on that virtual system, which is costly, and that may be the thing that a lot of people just don't want to do. But if you have the license for the operating system and you want to run that yourself, that's certainly an option. From a security perspective, I do a lot of security, I do a lot of networking. I like working in that virtual environment, whether it's online or it's on my computer, because I can make changes, I can disrupt things, I can break things, and I just click a few buttons and I'm back to where I was. So it's really, to me, the virtualized environment, whether it's in the cloud or on your desktop, is the way to go. For the A+, it does help to have hardware in front of you, but even that, for the A+ purposes, you can read a lot and understand a lot of what's going on with the hardware. The other thing that I've run into with the GTS Learning is just, it has to be online. You have to be there and work with it on your computer, but these days pretty much all of us have always on internet. That's not always the case. A number of people send me messages all the time saying, I need something offline because I don't have a good connection to the internet. But if you do, it's certainly a viable solution.
Yeah, my situation is probably the exact opposite of that because, naturally when you're in school and you're having to download a whole bunch of stuff, VMware, operating systems, I'm noticing since I'm towards the end and all of the stuff that I have downloaded into my computer, which I'm working with a MacBook Pro, but I have VMware in it. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of starting to get a little concerned with my resources.
Yeah, these virtual machines take up a ton of space. Let's pull up my VMware. I am running on my Mac desktop. In fact, if you've watched my Windows 7 course, my 7680 videos, which there's domain controllers and Windows desktops, and you're deploying from one system to another Windows system, all done virtually. The entire course was actually, the Windows course was all done on a Mac. But I have Windows systems here. I'm going to get info for my Windows system. So I'll flip over. So just the Windows 7 system that I have in VMware Fusion is 36.8 gig. I mean, it's a lot of disk space. In my case, a lot of memory, a lot of SSD space that I'm using just for this Windows operating system. And I run a lot of different operating systems on here. I have, let's see, in just this one, I wonder if I could show all of these things, because I'm running VMs all the time, an OpenSUSE, a CentOS, Ubuntu, smaller ones here that don't take up much room. I was running one that had a fix for the Heartbleed bug a number of months ago. In fact, you notice these, a lot of these, you can't see it on your side, but you can see it on mine. Not found, not found, not found, not found, not found, because I had to take them off my computer because I ran out of disk space. They're too big. I don't have the room to put all of these systems all over my computer and be able to capture the video that I need to capture and be able to do the video editing that I need to do, which takes an enormous amount of disk space, and SSD space in my case. And I'm right there with you. You start loading up these virtual machines, you run out of space really, really quick.
So what is the difference in cloning a machine and actually downloading another operating system?
Well, from a virtualization perspective, not much. In my case, there's a great website for those of you that are doing A+. Let me see if I can get the exact link on my computer to give everybody, because it speaks to the question you're doing or you're working with. Microsoft has been nice enough to put pre-built virtualized Windows systems out for you to download for no cost. This is something that you don't run into very often with Microsoft. These are systems you can't use for production purposes. You can't use it as your primary desktop. It's designed for people that are working with web development, and they want to be able to test different operating systems and different Internet Explorer versions without having to load up these separate systems and get them running by themselves. If you go out to modern.ie, modern, modern.ie, these are effectively Windows operating systems labs, and they have virtual machines already built. That's the purple section where you have you select the virtual machine that you want. They have Windows 10, Windows 8.1, Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows Vista, Windows XP. You can pick any one of those, download. Let's say I want to run on Windows 7 and IE 11 on Windows 7 because they're showing you a Windows running a particular Internet Explorer version you can use for testing. So if you're running VirtualBox for Mac, VMware Fusion for Mac, Parallels for Mac, it knows I'm on a Mac. If you're on Windows, it will show you the platforms for Windows. And then you simply download the VM and you're running. So if you want an alternative between using GTS Learning and doing it yourself, this might be a viable alternative for you. You just have to have the local resources in the disk space to be able to do that. Plus, of course, this doesn't come with labs. So you've got an operating system, it boots up and you're, okay, now what do we do? I've got an operating system. That's one of the things that a little bit extra you get with the GTS Learning. But if you mentioned what's the difference between downloading or cloning something you already have, here's a good example. I could download this VM and I've got a virtual machine now that I could put on my system. Obviously, they cloned a VM they already had and made it available to you. If you have a virtual machine you've already built, you could absolutely clone that one or duplicate it and build up another instance of it as well.
Well, boy, I sure thank you for that information. That was really resourceful.
That'll save you some money too. I like that part. And as long as you're using it for your studies, I read through the terms of service. Whenever I find one of these things, I'm like, there's a catch somewhere. What is the catch? So I read through the terms of service, and in there it says using it for lab purposes, using it for non-production purposes. You may not use this as your primary desktop. You may not use this as a primary usable production system. But that's what we do with the A Plus and the Network Plus and the Security Plus. It's all lab type work. So as long as we don't use this for our primary workstation, this is free and available. We can use it right now to do whatever you'd like. And I think Microsoft would like you to be able to work more with Windows. It simply makes sense for them as a company, I would imagine.
And naturally, you have to still configure them so you still get the experience with it.
I think so. Obviously, they've already installed it. They've already got things up and running. They just kind of give you a username and password, and in fact, the VM logs in automatically. So you do miss out on the installation part, which is an important part of the A+, is that you have to know how to install Windows 7, how to install Windows Vista. Obviously, you won't be able to do that, but my videos take you through and I show you live me installing them using a virtual machine. So if you want to watch the video, you'll probably have all the information you need to know about the installation, and these VMs might take you the rest of the way.
Okay. Hey, thank you, Professor Messer.
Thanks, Anthony. Take care.
Thank you.
We've got how are we on time? We got some time. Let's see what's happened in the chat room. We got some folks on hold. Get this piece. Okay. Let's hop back to the studio and take a call from the area code 480. Hi, caller. What's your name?
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, my name is John.
Hello, John. What can we do for you today?
I was just wondering actually about, I had a question about malware. As you know, that can be pretty scary. One of my dad's friends, I think, actually had that extortion message pop up.
Sure.
And, that sort of thing can actually happen. It's pretty scary. And I was actually just had a question about, getting an infection in your system files. I know in your security videos for A+, you mentioned, you might want to do a clean install, or you might want to back up first and then do a clean install.
Right.
And that might be the best way to get rid of it, to make sure everything's gone. But I just had a question regarding, is there any third-party legitimate programs out there you can use that will specifically go through the system files and make sure that everything is totally gone?
And in fact, this came up just before the study group. And if Tom is, I see Tom is at 564 is in the chat room. I think he put up a Reddit link earlier that had a really nice resource for different anti-malware cleaning systems. And I have a set of things that you can start with as well. I'll bring up my list of I have a lot of malware notes. Wow. Okay, I think here we go. Okay, I've got these that are in here. We'll have to scroll back. Somebody will scroll back way back to before the study group started and find that Reddit link for this. There are a number of tools that you can use to try to clean malware off of your system. And as you already mentioned, the only 100% guaranteed way to remove malware is to completely nuke the operating system and install it from scratch. There is no other 100% guaranteed way to do it. But a number of these anti-malware programs work extremely well. And in certain cases, they may be able to eradicate it completely from your system. In other cases, maybe so much. Thomas has been nice enough to add that link in the chat for the Reddit piece. My go-tos for what I do is Malwarebytes is the first one I use. And you'll notice when you start looking at malware removal that none of the malware removal programs tend to be antivirus programs. They are almost always specifically built to remove malware. Antivirus, and there's a whole conversation we could have about antivirus and the way it works. I am a former employee of a very large antivirus company, so I know exactly the process that's used to identify and find viruses. And I know the way that malware is distributed because now I work for an organization that does a ton of anti-malware. So the way that that I usually go is with these programs that are specifically built to remove malware. Malwarebytes is a very good one. It does an exceptional job at finding the latest malware and removing it. But it doesn't do 100%. It may identify but not be able to remove, or it may not identify at all. You usually need to take a whole cocktail of different things. Super Anti-Spyware is another very good one. And Rhonda in the chat room just mentioned Super Anti-Spyware, which is an extremely good one. And another one you should look at is Combo Fix. Another one that I like to use is Combo Fix. And I have a big list of those. A very good podcast for malware and these kinds of stories. If you wanted to try to find or talk to somebody or hear from somebody who goes through this all the time, or if you're somebody you're taking your A+, you're wondering what are people doing out there who go to a customer site and what do they work on all day? What problems do they run into? How do they solve these problems? One of the best podcasts out there is Mike Tech Show. Just Google Mike Tech Show, which you can get at mikenation.net. And his podcast is phenomenal because he's a guy that does it. And he'll run into troubleshooting malware all the time. And he's constantly changing his cocktail as well. It's finding, I found a new program. This works really well. Or we ran into this piece of malware and we ran Combo Fix to get rid of it because the malware anti-malware we were using before didn't work. Combo Fix was the only thing that got rid of it. So it's interesting to hear those stories from somebody who's going to a lot of different places and really fighting with this stuff in the trenches. And it's also a great podcast. He's extremely knowledgeable, great, funny guy to listen to. And I really do recommend listening to that as well and trying some of those programs yourself. Try the super anti-malware. Try the Combo Fixes yourself. You have to be very careful when you're running these programs because some of them can remove things from your system. They could possibly, once they remove the malware, make your system unusable. So you should understand how to recover the operating system that you happen to be working on. And at a very minimum, back up the data files that you have. Sometimes the data files themselves may have the bad stuff in them. And some very rare circumstances, things like spreadsheets and even less rare PDF documents themselves are just full of malware. And that's how the malware is getting in these days, is through these other mechanisms like PDF files and Word documents and spreadsheets to try to get into your systems. So you have to be very careful about what you back up. But know that even after going through all of those programs, you still may end up just deleting everything on the drive and reinstalling. And if you have a good backup, that's probably going to be the quickest way to do it anyway.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for all that info, Professor. That's actually the only question that I had.
Well, thanks for calling, John. Best of luck, and let us know how it goes.
Sure. Have a good Christmas.
Thanks. Same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We've come up to the top of the hour, and I don't have any more calls, but then again, I didn't put the phone number back up again for that piece, but I think that's probably all I'm going to be able to do to have these pieces there. Folks in the chat room are saying, so what do I use for anti-malware, anti-spyware, antivirus on my computer? And for the Windows, I use the built-in Windows. It used to be Windows Defender and the Windows antivirus. Now it's just built into the Windows 8 operating system, and being able to use those. Exceptional, actually quite good in what it does. You'll see antivirus studies done every month by third parties that will evaluate all of the different antivirus companies and how well they catch certain things. The tests they're okay tests. They don't really give you a very good idea of how things are running in the wild, because they have viruses and malware that they've collected that's already been out there. So what you're really most concerned about these days is what nobody's seen yet. And antivirus tends to be a number of days behind the latest things that are out there. You really have to watch out. Right when Microsoft introduces and says we have these patches on Patch Tuesday, you'll see a bunch of malware come out. Or whenever there's something that happens in the world, an event that occurs, you will see a lot of emails come through with malware attached to it about the event that happened in the world. These are things you really have to watch out. Adware is not as big of a concern these days, since the adware guys at least want your system to keep running so you can back up and, of course, then put it back on. It's the malware that really takes over your machine, and now you're part of the botnet, which now attacks different places around the net. That's some of the biggest challenges I have. CCleaner, that's a pretty good one for cleaning your system. It's not an anti-malware per se. Let me bring up the website for CCleaner at Puriform. Here it is. There. Let's bring this up. If you're trying to get rid of or clean out a program that's on your computer, and you can see they even have here temporary internet files, history, cookies. It's probably the most reputable one I've used, and it's free to be able to use to clean off all of those things from there. And I've used that before. It works pretty well. I like a number of their other programs too from that piece. I think that's what I run into, and other folks in the chat room saying, yep, Malwarebytes, Microsoft Security Essentials, that's kind of a nice mix. None of these are going to catch everything, 100% of everything. You have to still be very good about what you click on. Your biggest challenges are the things that allow people access to your computer without you having to click on anything. I always hear people go, I'm safe because I don't click on bad things. Well, that's not your biggest challenge. It's these vulnerabilities in Adobe Acrobat PDF, vulnerabilities in Flash, vulnerabilities in a spreadsheet or word processor or the browser itself, where you visit a website and without any interaction from you, it executes things on your computer. You didn't click on anything. You were a very good security-minded person, and you didn't click bad things. They don't need you. They get around you all the time. That's why you have to keep your Adobe Acrobat Reader up to date. You have to keep your version of Flash up to date. And that's why you keep your operating system patches always patched and up to date. That's why. Because they don't need you. They understand that you're not going to click on things. They understand that you're too smart for that. They try to trick you with things in an email. They try to trick you by sending you something very directed, or they try to trick you by just including it in a PDF document and hoping you have an old version of a PDF reader. Very, very painful to try to keep up with those things. Very, very painful. And I see it all the time. There is new stuff out there every day. It's remarkable how much is out there. And of course, we're seeing this with things like Sony. That was the big security hack of the week, of the year. They really got hit quite hard. So we can talk about all the other things. Staples was this week with millions of credit cards that was announced that got millions of credit cards ultimately. We already knew about the hack. And then this week we figured out how big it was. Home Depot, the things that happened at Target last year about this time, those are credit cards, and there's certainly a piece of that. But the bad guys also want your system to be on their botnet so that then they can take down other systems as well. Quite a bit of challenges. In the chat room, folks are saying, another good podcast at Tech Guy Labs. You can listen to the podcast for Security Now. That's another good one with Steve Gibson, where they talk all the time about the latest of things and what's going on in security. Well, that takes us to the top of the hour. It takes us to 2 full hours of what's going on here. We managed to make it through the shakedown cruise. The video worked. The audio worked for pretty decently. I need to do a little bit of tweaking.
90 seconds.
Oh, I know. A little bit of tweaking on that. But that's one of those situations where this could not have worked out better. Next month, I'll have more cameras up. You'll be able to see more of what's going on. Maybe then I'll be ready to actually give you a tour of how this whole system works. We'll put a YouTube video up for that piece. There's, of course, you can go to the website and see on the calendar exactly what's coming up next. You can go to professormesser.com/calendar. Follow us on Twitter. Follow me on YouTube and keep up to date with what's going on there. And I have, for those of you interested, next week at this time, next Saturday at 12 noon Eastern, is my Network Plus study group. So we'll go through all things networking. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We see you next time on the study group. Thanks, everyone.